Thank you, everyone, again for attending this conference today. Thank you for those joining us online. I guess there's one congregation that has, what did we say, 30 people attending at their congregation watching it? Wonderful. And I think there's probably at least 4 congregations doing that sort of thing. All right, we continue with our conference, and I'm privileged to introduce to you Dr. Jennifer Kamm. We've known each other for a number of years now. We started talking one time and realized that she's very perceptive when it comes to worldviews and what's going on, especially in her area of psychology. But I also discovered that Jen was very, how should we say, honest and not willing to speak the truth. She's bold, and she's had to exhibit this boldness more than once in her profession and more or less stand alone. And so I greatly commend her for that. But she also brings with her, I believe, a lot of insight into what we can do as individuals, as parents, as grandparents, as congregations that would be very beneficial to these young people that we are trying to raise in this crazy world we now live in. So please welcome Dr. Jennifer Kamm.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Jennifer Kamm. Thank you for having me here. So, I hold a PhD in developmental and child psychology from the University of Kansas. Prior to that, I received my undergraduate training at Temple University in Philadelphia. I'm coming before you as a psychologist. I'm very interested in how people grow and change through time. Any of the students who have come through our program and taken a class with me know this quote: human development, it's a pattern of movement and change that begins at conception, not at birth, but at conception. And it continues through the human lifespan. It continues. It's a pattern. There are norms, but it's movement and change that we can count on. I am a thankful wife, and I am a very proud mom of 5 boys ranging in age from 14 to 21. Way back in the day, at the beginning of my parenting journey, my husband and I went out to a landscaping place outside of town. I wanted to get some rocks to beautify our yard. So we went out on a wonderful sunny day. This was when we were in Lawrence, Kansas. Went outside of town with our young son, Job, who was about 2.5, 3 years of age at the time. So we get to the landscaping place, and a pile of rocks like this stood before me, and I love rocks. I absolutely love rocks. So I was captivated. So we sat our son down at the base of the rock pile, and we gave him some rocks and stones to play with. My husband and I then proceeded to pick out some beautiful rocks and stones for our house. Before we knew it, we were a good 10 to 15 feet up this wonderful rock pile. This rock pile was a good 2 stories high. We just wandered up. We were captivated. Before we knew it, we heard from behind us, someone ran out of the storefront. And we turned to discover that our young son, Job, was a good 3 to 4 feet up this rock pile behind us. Perilous situation. This person rightly scolded us, because we had taken our eyes off of what was most important that day. As you've heard from the first 2 presenters, we live in a world where there's not people coming in from the storefront anymore, willing to whisk our children away from danger. Instead, many of those people that we used to count on in our world to come to our rescue as parents, other parents, teachers, coaches, doctors, in my discipline, therapists, are standing at the base of the rock pile encouraging our children on, saying, go for the gold, go for the gold. Here's how you do this safely. Clapping and congratulating the child as they go up each step of this very perilous journey that they should not be on. And how many of us, just like my husband and I, took our eye off of what was most important? We binge watched some random show on Netflix when we should have been monitoring our child's phone. We got busy at work. We got busy wrapped up in all the wonderful distractions that the world provides us. And we took our eye off of what was most important in our homes. In our homes. But what's most important outside of our homes? What's most important, big picture? I come to you from a Christian worldview perspective. What does that mean? It means that I do believe that what's in the Bible from cover to cover is true. I don't believe that God lies. I don't believe he plays games. To answer the parent who stood in back of us earlier today and said, "What then should I tell my preschooler?" Jesus loves me. Jesus loves you. This I know. It is that simple. There is only one thing needful, and what's in the Bible is history. It's not a story. It's not made up. It's the most important book that should be in our homes, and it should be a book that our children see us reading and they see us coming into contact with. When we read them, and hopefully we take time to read them, the Bible stories, it's not a story. We make it clear that Noah and his ark, it's not a fun fantasy. We help them distinguish between Disney wonderful stories and the reality of the journey that we've been on from the Garden of Eden up until this point. These were real people, and we don't hedge. We make good eye contact. A friend of mine in graduate school, when I first became pregnant, said, "Yeah, Jen, watch people's eye contact." I'm trained as a behaviorist, and he said, "Watch people's eye contact. They'll say, oh yeah, because he had just had his firstborn. He said, people say, oh yeah, having kids, it's great." And he's like, they'll always break eye contact with you. They will always break eye contact with you. Because it's tough. It's tough to be a parent. But when it comes to our children, and this is a concept I'll cover a little bit later, social referencing, our kids come out and they watch our eyes. They watch our micro expressions. They're amazing at distilling when we're telling the truth and when we own it, or when we too believe that Noah and his ark is just a fantasy, it's just a story. When they ask us, is it true? We need to look them in the eye. You're my point person. We need to look them in the eye, and we need to say, yes, it is true. It is absolutely true. It's the truest thing that I will ever tell you. It is true. I'm complementarian. What does that mean? For those of you who are unfamiliar, complementarian means that I believe that God created us equal but different. We are distinct in kind. Men and women, he created them. Different but equal. One isn't on top, one isn't below, although we have very different roles to play. And I'll get into that later. I'm thankful to be a member of Peace Lutheran Church in North Mankato, and I'm a very thankful Sunday school teacher for a long period of time. So at the beginning of my journey as a parent, and maybe some of you share this, I thought at some point this would be my life. Maybe I'd be blonde. Maybe I'd be within 1 pound of my ideal body size. I definitely would go to bed and get up in the morning, and my husband would be joyously smiling behind me. Our sheets would be nicely white, bleached, they'd smell fresh. Okay, so I thought, well, maybe it's when the boys get out of diapers. That's the point, when this will happen. I waited for it. Nope, that didn't happen. Okay, maybe when they're in school. Maybe when they're all in school. Maybe when we finally have a driver in the house. Okay, I see some heads nodding, okay? So maybe that'll come, maybe when the first one leaves home and goes to college. Or maybe when the second one leaves home and goes to college. I keep waiting for it, but this is the reality. Right? This is our reality. We're waiting for it, and we're just like, really, it keeps coming. One danger after the next. What we're here to talk about today, And what I'm here to talk about is gender-solid parenting. How do we prepare our children for the journey ahead when it comes to gender? But the reality of it, folks, is that's our story today. That's what's facing us in the moment. We need to prepare ourselves for the world ahead. This life is so fleeting. This life is so incredibly short. And the trials and tribulations that we're facing now are going to be transformed into something different tomorrow, and definitely something different for our children and our grandchildren. Let's get ready and batten down the hatches. And it's not as complicated as some of you, after watching the first two presenters, it's scary. And the world is putting all of these crazy words in front of us that if you're like me, I took tons of notes. I don't know, I've got laundry to do later on today, right? We've got to get back to our day jobs. How do we make sense of this? Someone had written into our ELS board, what do? We have all these kids leaving who are from good Christian homes. And I really appreciate the response that was given. But after all is said and done, we parents need to remember that much of the training that we're supposed to do with our children is praying. The Holy Spirit doesn't need us ultimately. Miracles can happen. We are to pray, we are to give an example, and we are to trust that God brings about results in His time. We may not be able to see it, but He's listening 24/7. He's not on our time. So we continue to point. So what's the limitations? I can't do everything. I only have so much time. That's my last one. We have 80 minutes. Actually, it's 70 because we need to leave some time for question and answer unless I go over. So first of all, it's foundational, it's not therapeutic. I had a wonderful conversation with someone in between sessions that was a little bit more therapeutic. It's hard to do that with a large group. So I'm not going to hit you over the head with a lot of instances of what we would do if you have a particular child dealing with a particular situation. If anybody has those particulars, I would love to give you the name of a therapist or two that can connect you with other service providers if they're full. I'd be happy to do that, but this isn't therapeutic, it's foundational. It's for you, it's for me, it's for my sister, it's for my friends. It's what does the field of psychology have to say? What are some tools that we could use, that we could all use, that are applicable? Next is a framework. I was told not to be esoteric. So this is not going to have a whole lot of articles. I'm not going to hit you over the head with numbers. It's applicable, it's not voyeuristic. It's easy in a topic like this to show you some of the horrible graphic images of kids that have been mutilated, had different body parts grafted onto them from the skin of their forearms to make something that looks like a toilet paper tube that then the success is that they can pee standing up. Many of these folks will never go on to have an orgasm. They're imitating the opposite sex. What are the foundations? Focus on one goal. I'll tell you what that is in a second. Number 2, this isn't friendship. And number 3, it takes a lot of work. In my human development class, I begin the semester. We go through the journey from conception all the way to death. So at the beginning, I asked them to take on the role as young 20-somethings because we're a residential campus. Most of our students live on our campus. Most of them are in their early 20s. So I asked them, okay, put on the hat of you are a parent. What's your one goal going to be for this child that we're going to go through the lifespan? Not only have you never had a kid, but you're going to have to put yourself in the position of being a parent to someone who's in middle adulthood and late adulthood. How do you parent them? Because the parent responsibilities don't end when they're in diapers. They don't end when they go to school. They don't end when they graduate from college. They don't end when they become married. For those of you who are grandparents in the room, you have a responsibility. Your job as a parent didn't end when they turned 18, when they turned 21. They're not going to end when they're in their 60s. Your responsibility is to still help them and guide them. So the responses that I get, if you had to distill it down into one goal, what would it be? Some students would say, I want them to be employed. I want them to be valued. I want them to feel love. I want them to feel a sense of belonging. That's the one goal that they would come up with. Some of it would just very basic. I don't know how to cook. I just hope they stay alive. I just want them to be alive. I want them to grow up to be kind. Let's focus on kindness. Here's our goal, folks. Here's our goal, heaven. We want our kids and our grandkids to be in heaven. That's our goal. Don't lose sight of the goal. Don't shut the conversation down because you don't agree on their life choices. Keep going. You keep going. You keep going because the ultimate goal here is heaven. It's not to be happy. It's not to be healthy. It's not to be safe. It's not to feel secure. It's heaven. Heaven is our home. This is not. It's not a friendship program also. That's number 2. Your kid has 8.1 billion people in the world to like, that they can like, and they can appreciate, and that they can connect with. You don't have to be that person. Your job as a parent is way more important. And there's only 2 people in this world who have that job of being this kid's parents, and that's you and your spouse, period. Flip side, there's 8.1 billion people for you to have as a friend. Your kid is not your friend. They're not your confidant. They're not your marriage counselor. They're not. Go find someone to connect with who can be your friend. Your child is not your friend. Last, it takes work. Like those people that just look war-torn, it does. It doesn't end. It's a lot of work. And the work facing us right now, this is a big topic. I don't mean to diminish the weight of why we're all here today. It is a big topic, but trust me, the next topic is going to catch us by surprise. I have some suspicions, and I've been told by my husband not to talk about transhumanism today, but it is that there is right now, we see that the breakdown of what it means to be men and women, we're blurring that. We're blurring that. The next stage is you're not allowed to be an individual anymore. It's to go towards singularity. Great book called Feed explores this within the realm of sci-fi. That's the scarier thing, and it's going to seem palatable. We have a tutor. MIT just in Austin just came out with a great video clip. If I have time, I'll show it to you, but I had put that outside of my presentation because I think I'll take too long, but it does a great job of showing how AI now, in real time, can show what college students are thinking. It can spit it out in text. It knows how to brain scan in a way that we don't understand that data yet. As psychologists, we don't understand it as engineers. The human mind can't make sense of the data that AI can take in and then spit out in real time what someone's seeing. That's the next step. I'm thinking back to that Marlo Thomas song. You and I are free to be you and me. That means that we're free to be male and female. But make no mistake, the next step is we're free to have our own private thoughts. We're free to claim the truth of being me and you. So let's start. So no. How many problems, and we need to be honest with ourselves, how many problems could have been solved had we not just simply said no and stuck to it? And looked our kid in the eye and without apology, without regret, and without hedging, said simply no. We need to trust our gut, not trust our friends, not trust the school, not trust the counselor, but trust our gut. The law is written on our heart. We know the answers to some of these questions. Most of you, like me, don't have a degree in theology. I'm not coming before you as a theologian today. I'm coming before you as a psychologist who has 20-some years under her belt, as well as a mom, a Christian woman who I've said yes so many times when I should have said no. Let's encourage and support one another in saying no. Within our program, we've adopted this wonderful book called Exploring Psychology in the Christian Faith. And within it, Mose and Tellehausen have stepped back and they've organized, kind of created a framework of what does it mean to be human from a biblical worldview perspective. It's a really nice framework to hang your hat on. I'm not saying that this is the only framework, but it is very helpful. And I've put it into a sentence. Every man really, really believes. And if we could stretch a couple hours, really, really, really believes, because the world, the whole entire universe testifies that we have a creator. Every man really, really believes. What does it mean to really believe? It means that, number one, the Bible tells us that we're embodied. We exist in real bodies in space and time. We're not digital. We can't upload ourselves. We're real. And our bodies, how we live them out, our sleep, our nutrition, as our bodies grow and change through space and time, that influences our journey. We are embodied. Next, we are meaning seekers. We're fascinated. We were told in the garden, Adam, name the animals. Name them. We're fascinated. When we come out, we like sorting out our Legos. We like seeing the patterns around us. We like the story. We love those things. We're meaning seekers. Next, we're relational. We were meant to be in relationship with our God. We seek him out, and he seeks us out. But it wasn't right for man to be alone. And so what did he create? Anyone? Woman, a helper. We're meant to be in relationship with one another. We're meant to complement one another. We're seeking relationship with one another throughout the lifespan. The next is we're responsible limited agents. This means that there's a consequence. Gravity is real. We can choose to go left or to go right. We can choose in our family to go left and go right. There's a consequence, though, of going left or going right. We're responsible for the choices that we make and the consequences that come as a result. Last, we're broken and in need of redemption. We can't fix this. Psychology, no matter how many studies we do, we're not going to be able to fix this. We're not going to be able to come up with some magic formula or theory that's going to show us how to deal with this problem, how to navigate this complicated thing called life. We're unable to do that because we're broken. Fundamentally, no matter how hard we try, no matter how hard we run, no matter how good our job is, no matter how many books we read, no matter how many PhDs we get, we are fundamentally broken, and we're going to stay that way. We can't expect the next generation to figure it out, and we can't bemoan the fact that, in my case, the baby boomers didn't figure it out. We can't bemoan that fact. We are going to be broken because we need a Savior. And God loved us so much, he sent a Savior for us. So what does this mean when it comes to parenting? Okay, here's where I have to put my glasses on. It means that when it comes to being embodied, let's step back and recognize how males and females are fearfully and wonderfully made. It's not an accident. Number two, we're meaning seekers. Let's celebrate the certainty of our identity in Christ as a male or a female. Let's celebrate it. Let's not complain about it. Let's not look for all the flaws, because we'll find plenty of flaws. Let's celebrate it. Next, that we're relational. We're meant to be in fellowship with each other. Let's worship, connect, support, and encourage one another in our journeys as Christian men and women. Next, we're responsible. Let's create an environment that honors and celebrates the unique gifts and talents of men and women to bring glory to God, and then dispel. We're responsible for dispelling non-biblical stereotypes and fighting against it. We should be justice warriors. We should not be sinning, and we should stand up when things are wrong. We call it, and we say it's wrong. We don't back away from that. Some of the things that our kids are complaining about and that they're rallying and saying, oh, this is all wrong, some of the things that they're talking about, it is wrong. We shouldn't discriminate. We shouldn't make assumptions. We should love each other more. Absolutely. Lastly, we're broken. Let's recognize that our identity is through Christ. It's something that's been given to us. We are a forgiven and redeemed biological male or female. We're never going to be a perfect man or a perfect woman, which is why we needed a Savior. I don't know why those images aren't appearing. Well, okay. So what do we have? What are we standing against? So in 2012, there was a wonderful book written, and I say that tongue-in-cheek, of how do we do gender-neutral parenting. This was one of the first organized attempts to instruct the world to go in a different direction that goes against God's lawful and orderly design for men and women. Number one is to become aware of genderization, that it's a construct. It's not based on anything real. You're assigned your gender. Next is to become aware of your gender bias, that there's something wrong with you approaching the world as a unique expression of being a male or a female, and you need to get in touch with how that's wrong. Next, start a dialogue about gender, and this is in the specific context of parenting, where you need to sensitize your child to the discrimination that they're going to face or that they're going to dish out if they're a male because of their sex. Number 4, create a gender-diverse environment. What does this mean? It means going green for your baby. It means that we don't choose baby blue or baby pink anymore. It means we don't buy the little girl a purse or a doll. It means that we go and gravitate toward purple for painting the baby nursery. Everything needs to be neutral. Next, we need to deal with this very combative language was taken directly from these directions in this book. So deal with friends and dispel myths. Because again, God's lawful and orderly created universe is just something that we've constructed in history and that we've had put upon us. From there, unfortunately it's not appearing, we have raising them. Is another example that I wanted to illustrate for you. And actually, I'm looking out, if you have time in between my talk and the next one, I encourage you to take a look at the books. I'm an academic, I couldn't help but bring books here. So on the table, you'll see a bunch of books that I would recommend as side reading if you're wanting to read some more about this. One of them is Raising Them. So it's a parent's attempt to raise a child called Zoomer. And they're not telling Zoomer who they are, nor are they telling their friends and family who they are. And the book goes up through the child's ages 4, I believe, at the end of the book. So again, educating an audience of how do we deny this. And it's really an interesting read of seeing how this family has to go through so many hurdles to keep their own heads straight of Zoomer is a them instead of a he or her, and then dealing with other people, unnecessarily complicating life. Like I said, after this talk today, I want to do laundry. I've got work to do. The idea of overly complicating my life and my child's life by constructing a world that doesn't fit with reality sounds like more than I can take on, but yet kids are taking this on in their teen years as part of their identity work, and they're being encouraged to do so. The third book has to do with how we then go outside of it. So how to raise your rainbow child and gather queer allies. So this is really how to create an environment in your own home and then within your community that is completely open and accepting of pretty much anything. How do we go about doing that? It was a systematic approach. So again, I want to remind you, the Bible shows us this is what it means to be human, and we don't need to back away from it because it's true and it's wonderful. So let's begin. We are embodied. All of my images are for some reason not showing up, but we'll just go with it. But while we're waiting, as far as reading those books though, we need to guard and keep our hearts and minds. And so recently I went through my book collection. My husband very generously created a whole bookshelf system for me in our basement as well as up in our office. And I weeded through my book collection because the reality is we need to be mindful about what we're reading. How do we spend our days and our nights? I would encourage you instead to read devotions, get into the People's Bibles series. Like we only have so much time to batten down the hatches for ourselves. You know, and sometimes we spend too much time with the darkness at hand and not edifying ourselves with what is good, right, and salutary. So, just a cautionary tale. So this is the director of the Whitehead Institute and professor of biology at MIT. So he has made quite a career for himself pointing out to fellow biologists that we need to back up because historically we wanted to have medicine for males and females because we recognized at the turn of the last century that, hey, we need to know, is aspirin in what dose safe for men versus women? We need to know how does alcohol affect men versus women? But the reality of the research that's being done today is that when people are doing research on a substance and testing it out at the cellular level, they have no idea whether those cells are male or female. They have no idea. No idea. And so he's calling out his profession and saying, hey, reminding everyone of basic biology that we hope our high schoolers are still learning. That male and female, he created them. Fun fact, every single cell in our body is male or female. Every single cell. It doesn't matter what you think about it. It doesn't matter what you do on the external part of it. Every single cell is male or female. Every single cell in your body. It's not a construct. It's not something that happens despite what we want to happen. It's not something that's happened as a result of some mistakes that the baby boomer generation made or Generation X who is cynical about everything. No, this is just the way it is. Male and female, he created them. Here's a 2023 book on sex and gender-specific biology in the post-genomic era. I highlighted this part, but I did not add the exclamation point. The sex chromosomes are just not expressed in gonadal tissue, but are present in every cell in the body, leading to the implication that all cells have a sex. All cells. But when we compartmentalize our human body, it's easy to go, okay, so that if I just graft on and I can interchange these parts, then I too will become a woman, or I'll become a male. No. It's just fundamentally who you are. In my gender class, when I introduced the distinction between sex and gender, I had a young man this last semester, I overheard him in his group say, but I don't know what it means to be a male. And I said, it's to be you. Now, sometimes you may have gone off in this direction and been interested in these things. Now that you came to college, maybe you're interested in other things. You are a unique expression of men and masculinity that's never been before. What does it mean to be a man? You tell me. Right. Your dad's not going to tell you. He can guide you in his interests and his talents, and he should. Because we do have a wonderful culture of men and masculinity. And we've forgotten and derided and vilified a lot of that culture. Same thing for women. How many of us had grandmothers who were wonderful in the home? I see a lot of heads nodding. They knew their stuff. We've outsourced so many of that. Now we have a nutritionist. We have a child care specialist. We go to the store to buy our clothes. We outsource so much of the jobs that women traditionally did. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to take up crocheting, and I'm not saying on the guys end that everyone needs to own a gun. But I'm saying, why not? Okay, so that's where that guy was. Okay, so back into my field, the field of psychology. Okay, we have an ethical code of conduct that we are historically supposed to be bound to. Ever since the Nuremberg trials, we were one of the first professions that stepped back and said, okay, we need to keep ourselves honest. We cannot harm people. And that was our first, principle A, do no harm. This was a case where we historically would put this in front of our students and we would say, okay, here's something horrible that a psychologist, I believe she was from Canada, because she's not an American, I think she's from Canada, this particular therapist, because we wouldn't do anything like this. We had Jewel Shuping, who came in as a beautiful 21-year-old who had functioning eyes. She had body integrity identity disorder. She believed firmly that she should be blind. And her therapist helped her put Drano in her eyes. And I hear you gasp, but here's the reality. Our kids are going to Planned Parenthood, and without having to tell anyone, without the consent of a psychologist, they're able to have the equivalent in their bodies, toxic chemicals that are actually probably worse than Drano. And our field helps them. We applaud it, actually, and we're bound now, because of our association's guidelines, to do the equivalent to the entire human body, not just the eyes. How far we've come. My first introduction to the field of psychology was this book, Dick Malott. Colorful character, wonderful case studies in his book that step undergrads and high schoolers and graduate students through an understanding of psychology from a behavioral perspective. And I can't stress enough the strength of the behavioral perspective. 1991 was the second edition. This is a very popular book. Who is the audience? They say that they wrote it for undergrads, but the American Psychological Association highlighted this book and said, this is a wonderful book. It's a wonderful book. We think it should be used for high schoolers. And as you can see here, it's been used with people who are studying dentistry, social work. It's a popular book. It's now in its, I believe, it's in its 8th edition. On the very first page, I'm a woman trapped in a man's body, part 1. So very first page, and here's Moz, but here's what we were saying. We were saying from a behavioral perspective, it was known in psychology, up until just a couple years ago, that this was entirely malleable. It's a stimulus. Our body responds to stimuli around us. And over the course of this book, which was very popular in psychology, we shared with the next generation of psychologists the hope that even something like our sexuality could change. We could do something with this. By the end of this vignette, by the end of the book, the students saw how the behaviorist slowly and systematically got this person into a position where they were comfortable with their body again. This was on the very first page of 1991, 1997, 2000, 2003 to 2008. Then they started to get savvy, and they put it online. They pulled it out of the actual textbook, and it was 26A. If you wanted information on more on sexuality, go to 26A, because we needed to kind of keep that under wraps, right? Because this was no longer politically correct, but we still pointed students to it up until just 2 years ago, when and this is interesting from the first presenter, because this was Pearson Press. And then it went into a different publishing house, and then got completely reorged for this most recent edition. But if you go to Dick Malot's website today, you will see that that case study is still out there. And I appreciate Dick's integrity that he's still holding it out there. But within that chapter now, there's an apology opening, a segment that is apologizing for this. And he's saying that he took it out in the second edition. He did not take it out in the second edition. It is on the very first page of how many editions. The idea that psychology suddenly discovered something new, that identity stays the same and it's not malleable. We didn't discover anything new. We just changed our rhetoric. So the question that I have for you, do you recognize this reality, and how are you sharing this with your children? In the human development class, the students are given the task of interviewing those who are in their parents' generation and their grandparents' generation. Generally, then they interview their parents and grandparents. One of the questions is, what was it like for you to go through life as a man or woman? And it's really interesting to hear their responses, because more often than not, their parents and grandparents, according to the students, pause and they have no idea how to answer that question. While it's been a wonderful conversation up until that point, there's just this kind of deer in the headlights look of, what do you mean? What do you mean? What does it mean to be a male and a female? What has that meant to me? I encourage you all to reflect on what's that been like for you. You've had a unique journey, and it's been different than your brother or your sister. It's been different than your friend. Your unique experience as being a male or female is unique to you, and at the same time, there are some similarities. The guys in the room, if I sorted you out, would have a lot in common with the other men in the room. Same thing with the women. And we can say, oh, that's just socialization, that's just socialization. It's not socialization, it's every single cell in your body, and it's, again, the particular expression is unique to you. If the guys were all on this side of the room, not all of you would share the same interests. Not all of you would have the same talents. But if we've ever listened to a choir, recently at Bethany we had a wonderful reunion this past year, and it was absolutely wonderful to listen to this enormous choir, and it's so clear and it's so beautiful to listen to how the voices complement one another. The bass voices, well, there are women who have deeper voices. They just don't compare to that natural, resonating sound of a true bass. Similar to the sopranos. Absolutely beautiful. And they work in harmony with each other, and we do need people in the middle. We do need people in the middle. We are meaning seekers. So here's a list that you would see in a lot of books in the social and behavioral sciences outlining what the stereotypes are. So we see that feminine, we cry more, we're emotional, we're kinder, we're indecisive as compared to the masculine list. They rarely cry, they're logical, they're analytical. And we ascribe a lot of negativity on this. Because again, the script that we were given back in the day that was illustrated in that 2012 book is that we need to become sensitive to this. And we don't want to. If we're a woman, we don't want to be in that pink list. We want to be in a purple list, I guess. So Sarah. Sarah is a young woman of 24. She was married and she had one child, and both her husband and her child were killed tragically in a car accident. Her best friend came over and held her hand the entire time through the hours that it took for Sarah to make all of those horrible decisions that need to be made when you're preparing a funeral. Then she went out and she bought Sarah her favorite perfume, a little bit of lotion, and she painted her fingernails and her toenails. Then she proceeded to sleep with her and hold her tight every night for 7 nights in a row as they both cried themselves to sleep. I aspire to be that woman. I aspire to be that friend. Yep, that friend cried a lot. Yeah, She was kind, she was gentle, she was generous. Isn't that the best of us as women? And it doesn't mean that men shouldn't have some of these qualities, absolutely. But God did create us differently. We gravitate toward this. We have hearts that want to help and want to nurture and tend and befriend. Now Jessica. Jessica, I believe it was in 2011, was captured by a group of Somali pirates. 9 of them. SEAL Team 6 dropped in 12 miles outside of town where she was being held. They walked on foot. When they got to where she was being held, they ran into the gunfire. They ran toward harm and danger to get her. One of them grabbed her up, put her over his shoulder, and then proceeded to run while the rest slaughtered those Somali pirates. When they got to where the rendezvous point was, they surrounded her. When they thought they heard something in the bush, they threw her on the ground, and according to her report, they all guarded her with their bodies. They dogpiled on top of her until help came. They literally protected her with their bodies. Were they ruthless? Absolutely. Without hesitation, they killed all those Somali pirates. Did they cry about it? No, they did not. Did they talk about it? Probably not. I hope that my 5 sons aspire to be that kind of guy. And I'm thankful that my husband is that kind of guy. So parenting. From a developmental perspective, we know that we're more likely to repeat what we've observed. What we've observed repeatedly, to be specific. Our early home lives make a difference. On a neurological level, we're always malleable. We always have the opportunity to grow and change, but we gravitate toward that which is most familiar to us. I want you to think back to your own childhood experience with your primary caregivers. For most of you, that's a mom and a dad. So when you think about the home environment with your mom and dad, what did you hear most often and what did you feel most often? So the first, did you hear a lot of, I understand? Did you hear a lot of, if you're happy, I'm happy? Did you hear a lot of, how do you feel about it? If you look back on your childhood experience and it seems like a warm blanket and your shoulders drop and you have a physiological response of, yeah, it was great. My parents were really supportive. They really understood me. They really got me. That was style number one. Style number two, did you hear a lot of, just do it. Do what I tell you. This is the way we do it. This is the way things work. Because I said so. Did you feel more like it was like a clock? We got a time schedule, we got to do it. And things probably worked out more often than not, but you felt like you were on a clock, like this was a job. I've got to show up on time. I've got to do this. Then your style number two. Number three, did you hear a lot of, I have to work. I'm busy. Here's some money. Maybe, did you hear a lot of maybe laters? We'll get to that. Hopefully. Did you feel like, when you look back on your childhood, kind of like it was you were like a glass of water that wasn't in the glass? You were an empty glass. Is that your experience? Where you just felt invisible? You felt like nobody was filling up your cup. You felt empty and alone. That would be number three. Number four, did you hear a lot of, do this and let me tell you why? Did you hear a lot of, for example? Did you hear a lot of, it's because? Do you feel like, when you look back on your childhood, like it was an extension of your elementary school and it never ended? You went to school, and when you got home, it just continued. There was a lot of instruction. Well, these are parenting styles. And while we'd like to think that we're all in the teacher model, the reality is we gravitate toward what we knew. We had the most experience with that. And we're all really savvy of pulling something out of someone else's eye and ignoring the plank in our own eye. We hear this at the grocery store, right? We hear the kid who's whining for something and then the parent gives in. That's the indulgent parent style. That's the permissive. We hear that. We hear the kid who's lost at the grocery store and doesn't know, or the parent who's pushing the cart along and the kid is chatting and trying to connect with mom or dad, and they're just blindly looking off, not at all attending to their child. We see it, but we don't see it in ourselves. The authoritarian parenting style. Don't do this, do that. When we're honest with ourselves, do we gravitate toward that what we knew? Without being intentional, without this reflective piece, it's really easy to get sucked back into a pattern that you may not be intending. Well, just a little bit more about this. When it comes to, I think I had it on my handout, when it comes to the permissive parenting style, we need to be mindful because it looks good. Again, this is the friendship program. It looks good and it sounds good. It's soft and it's gentle. It is like a hug. It's keeping the kids happy. But it's sinking sand. Over time, that will not withstand, they will not withstand, and they become very self-centered because they've never ran into really the word no. In that book, Raising Them, the mom at the end laments the fact that eventually her child's going to go into a store and pick out something, an article of clothing, and then be told, you can't wear that. And I'm thinking, if that's the worst that happens to this child, that someone's going to say, no, you can't wear that, like, they're going to experience a lot of hardship. And we need to strengthen them for the journey to come. Educate them that, yes, things are going to be difficult, and it is going to be challenging. Those kids end up very selfish and self-centered. They're risk takers. We're not doing them any favors by being their friend. The kids that are in the unloved parenting style, those kids are out to sea. They don't know which end is up. They don't know where shore is. No one's ever pulled them aside and said, you're loved, you're valued, you're important. So they go out into the world and can be rather ruthless because they haven't been seen. And we sometimes think, oh, that can't be me, that can't be me. Well, can't it be me? If we're in law and we have a large trial coming up, How easy it is to get distracted for a season of time. A season of time in the life of a child seems like what for us would be years. And that's the next slide, of how fast those developmental stages go by in the life of a child. When it comes to the authoritarian parenting style, for many conservatives, this is the way, go this way. But the problem is, you're not always going to be there to tell them to go this way. The world is going to tell them it's a cool rock pile, keep climbing. And they're going to go, I'm strong, I can do it, I'm independent. I'm my own person. No, stand here. This is the rock. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you over and over and over again why this is the rock you stand on. And again, what is our goal? It's heaven. Don't get distracted. There's only one thing that is needful. One thing. The world's going to come at you with all these different problems. It's really not that complicated, regardless of what stage of development you're in. And now let's go to that point. So Erikson's psychosocial theory. This is a helpful construct that I'm putting in front of you because it's important to know that as embodied beings, we grow and change, and the hurdles that we face, they come in waves over time. And those waves, though, we continue to battle with the waves that came before us as a new wave comes and hits us. So the very first wave that we have is trust versus mistrust. This is our very first crisis. If you take yourself back, which you don't remember because we have infantile amnesia, but if we could remember what it was like to be a newborn, we'd know that we can't do too much. We're entirely dependent upon our caregivers. We need to trust that they will do what we need them to do. Trust. We come into the world craving predictability, craving structure, craving organization. And that is something that we gravitate toward throughout the rest of our lives. This is the foundation of the life experience from a psychosocial level. We want to trust one another. We want to know that the world is predictable. We want order. God created a lawful and orderly universe, but unfortunately, we overly complicate it. We overly complicate it, and we forget. Essentially, it all boils down to one thing needful. And within that, though, we need to make sure that we're doing the adult version of making sure that the diapers are being changed, that feeding is happening at feeding time. Clocks are valuable. Structure is good. Structure. We operate well within a structure. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't Adam go out and when you feel like it, Adam go out and just call it whatever you want. There was a taxonomy that was created. It's lawful. We can predict it. A giraffe is a giraffe is a giraffe. We like that as human beings. The next step is that we discover that we're different from the group. And we need to encourage that. I'm different from you. That's the toddler stage, where we pull back and we say, I'm different than you, mom or dad. While everybody else is eating peas, I'm going to spit my peas out. I'm not you. I'm different than you. I'm my own person. Next, preschool. Initiative versus guilt. I can do things, and I'm good at some things. We need to catch them being good. Time in needs to be time in. We need to get to know our kids. It's at this point, preschoolers, that again, for so many of us, we have them go off to preschool and we ignore, for example, their need for a nap. They're embodied little beings who still have a significant need for sleep, more than what adults have. The world would tell us that adults, it's called childism, the discrimination against children. Watch out for this word. It's like ageism. Childism. Children are nothing essentially but mini adults who should have bodily autonomy. What does that mean? Someone else mentioned it before. Yes. The world of the pedophile is going to be coming at us faster than we can imagine. Because again, we view them as little autonomous beings. Right now, we've assumed that our teenagers are autonomous beings, and they can make sweeping decisions that are going to impact the rest of our lives. Make no mistake, eventually we're going to get to the point where your third grader, your first grader, your kindergartner can make their own decisions about their body. Be mindful. Let's catch them being good. You are different from me, and you do some things wonderfully well because you're a unique expression of the universe of what it means to be male and female. God does not make mistakes. You are good. And here's the thing, I put in that handout for you. You are mine. Start stressing that. You are mine. You are not your teachers. You are not your coaches. You're not a member of a team. First and foremost, you're mine as a parent. You're my child. You're my child. Reflect God's love with that child. It's unique. And it's never ending. While the coach comes and goes, the teachers come and go. We're the constant in this child's life. We need to invest more in time. While yes, they're different than us, their interests and their talents are going to be very different than us. Again, catch them being good. What are they good at? Next, childhood, 6 to 12 years old. Industry versus inferiority. This is where we start to compare ourselves to one another. Constant comparisons. Historically, for those that have studied gender, we knew that at this point is when kids start to have what we call gender schools. When we went into schools and we started looking at what was happening with socialization, we assumed that it was the teachers who were saying what it meant to be boys and what it meant to be girls. And what we found is that this was happening on the playground. Because at this point, industry versus inferiority, they're making constant comparisons. And they notice, they're savvy. We had that gold star program of every kid who tries to win the race gets a gold star. The kids didn't like it because they knew who won the race. They didn't want it because it didn't mean anything. They knew that everybody got one, it didn't mean anything, and they knew who the winner was. And on the playground, they know who's more likely to cry when they fall down and skin their knees. They know it, they see it. They know who's more likely to roughhouse. Now, is that every boy or is that every girl? No, and that's the thing. They sort themselves out, and they kind of form their own social groups because they're constantly comparing to one another. And that's normal. It helps them to identify, what does it mean to be me? Because I'm not good at everything, and we need to help them see that that's okay that you're not good at everything. God opens these doors, and he closes these doors. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Adolescence, entirely normal. This is our time, 12 to 18 years old. Our amygdala is out of control at this point. Our prefrontal cortex is just getting online. Prefrontal cortex is involved in decision making. It's involved in sorting through all the impulses that we have. At this point in life, I point out red is more red. And we thank God it's more red. Because these are the kids who will write amazing poetry. They will listen to a song. And when you think back to your own time at this, remember those songs that you just thought, oh, that nailed it. That's exactly what I experienced. Yes. Or when you had that friend who was mean to you, and it just felt like that was the end of the universe. It is. It's so poignant. It's so beautiful. It's so raw. That's where they're at. Everything is raw. Until a little bit later, when the prefrontal cortex again catches up and can put the brakes on. It's at this point that they're trying to feel, when red is more red and they have all these emotions, that's when they're trying to figure out, what does it mean to be me? And it historically has been a wonderful time. Again, it's easy where I'm sitting to say it's a wonderful time. We all know that when we were going through it, it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun at all. I mean, let's be honest. Because everything was so dramatic. Mom or dad forgot to buy milk. You don't have milk for breakfast for your cereal. It's just like an entire meltdown. It's a breakdown, right? Because, oh my gosh, like there's no milk. Like, what do you mean you forgot? Like, you're in charge here. Aren't you supposed to be in charge here? I don't have a driver's license. There's no milk. Great. My day is ruined. I mean, we've all, it wasn't fun at the time. It was a lot of emotion. But thank goodness it is emotion, because it is important for us to discover, what does it mean to be me? Who am I? I am a unique expression, and it's important. God loves me. He told me so. What does it mean to be me? What does it mean to really be me? And once we start to go through that, and thank goodness the prefrontal cortex kicks in, because otherwise we'd all would be just eating each other alive at this point. Prefrontal cortex kicks in, and then the next step is, let's figure out what it means to love and truly be loved by someone else who's going to compliment us. Once we've gone through this process, let's figure out what it means to love and be loved. Sidebar just for a minute. It's unfortunately during adolescence that we start medicating our young women. We give them birth control pills. That unfortunately changes the hormonal cycle that they go through, and so they gravitate towards some choices instead of other choices that would be more natural to them. We know that with our hormonal fluctuations, that when we are ovulating, the type of guy that we are going to be more attracted to is one with a square jaw, who is less feminine. I'm not saying that that's why marriages are dissolving today, that suddenly women go off birth control when they're married and then discover, hey, I'm not really attracted to you. I think it's more complicated than that. It's more complicated than that. But we should not be doing this. At the group level, we should not be doing this because it interferes with our own identity development. It does. And we trick ourselves into saying, oh, it's because she has acne. Oh, she has, this particular menstrual problem or that particular situation. Everybody's doing it. It's not because she's going to engage in premarital sex. Okay, but at a biological level, this is not good practice. Next stage, middle adulthood. So when our person, and again, it's kind of odd, but for those of you who are in the midst of middle adulthood, when your little person becomes a middle adulthood, it's generativity versus stagnation, and that's what most of you are in, and then some of you are in integrity versus despair. But those who are in generativity versus stagnation, you are handling a lot. This is a sandwich generation where you have so much coming at you, you're trying to figure out, how do I make a difference? How do I make good, meaningful contributions to the people around me? I have so many opportunities to serve. How do I discern which one? Where do I start? The last stage, the last crisis, is we pull back. And thankfully, society has arranged for us time called retirement, which hopefully most of us will achieve, where we can truly pull back and have time to think about it. But we do this throughout our lifespan, and I'll get to that in a second, but this is where we pull back and we say, have I spent my time well? What's the value of my choices? Have I done the best that I could with what God gave me? And the reality is, Erickson, I don't know his faith life. I don't know what he was, if he was a Christian or not. I should know this, but I don't know this. But psychology would have you say that if you make all the right choices, eventually you'll end up with integrity. Based on what I told you about humanity, based on what the Bible says, we know that we're going to end up in despair. If it's up to us, we're going to end up in despair because we're not going to make all the right choices. We're not going to have the right routines for our kids. More often than not, we're not going to have dinner on time. We're going to forget things. We're going to forget them at school. We're going to forget that they have graduation coming up and we need to plan ahead for that. We're going to forget a lot of things. We're going to say, do this because this is what I want, not recognizing that they're their own independent person. The whole way along this cascade here of their lifespan, we're going to make mistakes. And not just with them, but with our spouse, with our coworkers, with our sisters and brothers, we're going to make mistakes. So what do we do about that? Thankfully, we don't have to do anything about this. Christ has shoulders that are much broader than ours. We put that on him. He solved the problem for us. The power of the discriminative stimulus. So I'm moving on now. Educators historically knew that when we introduce navy, blue, and purple, when we introduce colors, we don't introduce navy, blue, and purple at the same time because it's hard to tell which one is which. We introduce navy and we introduce yellow. We make clear contrasts. When it comes to our letters and our sounds, we don't do C and K back to back, right? Because they sound the same. Instead, we do C and S. We do something that sounds very different. in this, one of the strategies of gender-neutral parenting, and unfortunately, so many of us, I remember being, what should I paint the nursery? What color should I have the materials be? Anyway, I micromanaged my kids' nursery experience, and I gravitated toward neutral because we didn't know what we were gonna have. So I gravitated toward neutral, and then when we did have boys, it was, okay, do I really wanna lean all into all blue? Anyway, so we went toward more purples and yellows. Unfortunately, in the culture of children, we've gone green with them. And we've created an environment where it's very hard for them to discern boy from girl. It's so hard for them to discern. So you see the line of boys here, you see the line of girls here. The reality is, all these kids are within the same age group. The top line is actually all the girls. The bottom line is all the boys. How are they supposed to know? And I'm not saying boys can't have long hair by any means. And I'm not saying girls shouldn't have short haircuts. They can be really adorable, absolutely adorable. But how do we expect them to navigate these waters when we make it overly complicated? And we do have, and I am not saying that girls shouldn't wear jeans. And I'm not saying necessarily that I don't exactly know what the situation would be, but that a boy shouldn't wear a dress. That's not what it's about. It's how do we help them to shape identity already at this age? Because again, when we go back to the different stages of development, we're always facing these. We always need to gravitate toward order. The power of the discriminative stimulus. We need to be able to identify under what circumstances do I say, because we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings on the playground by saying, go ask her, only to find out as a 3, 4, 5-year-old that that's actually a him. How are we helping each other out? And if we're sending our kids to school and they're constantly, somebody's referring to them as him all of the time, and they don't know why, they just know that they didn't really like to have their hair combed. So we're giving them cute little short haircuts, but the reality is when we ship them out and they're on the playground, the children are gravitating toward calling her a him. It's confusing. We don't have to make the world this confusing for our children. Let's do better. James Marcia. This is identity status theory. So with the students, I brought these here, and I won't have you do this, but I'll put these on different walls in the classroom, and to make a point that our identity is in constant formation, we have different domains of identity. So while the world would have us believe that you're going to discover it, you're going to go back into your dorm room, and you're going to look at your navel, and you're going to figure it out, it doesn't happen. It's a slow process over time with many starts and many stops. For all of us, when we go into an assisted living facility someday, most of us will have to have some type of care at some point if we live that long, we're going to go through this. What does it mean to be me in the context of an assisted living facility? Do I sit at Jessica's table or do I sit at Judy's table? Do I like to play these games because these are the only games available, or do I like to spend more time in my room? What kind of person am I? We're always doing this. We're always doing this. The 4 different statuses, though, we see the moratorium. This is where we're trying to figure it out. We're putting on different hats and we're seeing what feels good. For kids who are going through this, it's entirely normal during adolescence to try out different hairstyles, to try out different clothing, to go through different friendship groups, to truly, and again, they're hypersensitive because of that amygdala. They're really trying to get a sense for, on an emotional and on a physical level, of where do I fit? So they're exploring options. The diffusion would be when we're not aware that this is a situation, and we all have met people like this. And it's a rare breed, but they are very content in being them. They haven't thought about these issues. They're definitely not psych majors. They don't know and they don't care what it means to be them. They just are. They're very content with where they are. Foreclosure is that they can tell you who they are and they've always known. For some, it was something that they've adopted from their family, from their culture, from their community. They've just always known. They've had foreclosure. I'm a psych major. I can't relate to that. Achievement. These are the people that, once they've gone through this process of exploring different options, they've achieved, they've arrived. Now, as parents, I'm telling you this because as parents, you probably, in your journey through space and time, your journey through adolescence, and most likely then your journey when you go into assisted living facility, you're going to go into one of these, and you're going to think, well, isn't this what everybody does? Don't you always just know? Or you may be in diffusion. Why are you asking this question? Like, what do you mean? This is just what we do. I don't know why we do it. What are you talking about? But recognize that other people have different journeys on figuring out who they are, and that that's normal, and we actually have words to it. Help children to have this language so they understand what's happening to them. And they understand that it's a process. Human development is a pattern of movement or change. It begins at the human point of conception, but it continues through the human lifespan. We're not going to stop. You can't teach old dogs new tricks. We're learning so much about late adulthood. Our capacity to change and to grow is absolutely amazing until the very point of death. Absolutely amazing. God always provides us with chances to come closer to Him. It's never the end of the story for anyone. But we tell ourselves some crazy things along the way. If you had 2 books on your shelf that are self-helpy type books, the one would be David Burns, 1989. He wrote a book called Feeling Good, The Art of Mood Therapy, I believe it's called. The other one would be really unknown, but really good. It's by William Backus, Telling Yourself the Truth. We need to tell ourselves the truth. When we don't tell ourselves the truth, Burns picks up the story from where Backus left off and points out that there are 3 different categories of distortions, of lies that we tell ourselves. Some of the lies are under the category of categorization. We sort our Legos out into categories that don't reflect what's actually happening. So it's all or nothing, black or white thinking. It's overgeneralization. This happened, so everything is ruined. It's a mental filter, only focusing on certain details and not taking in the whole story. It's discounting the positive and only seeing the negative. We also have distortions of control where we don't tell ourselves the truth. We have should statements about how we think we have the right to tell God how it should be. Ultimately, that's what our should statements are doing. It's us telling the creator of the universe, it shouldn't be this way. My friend shouldn't be like this. My body shouldn't be like this. Things should be different. It's a lie. Personalization and blame, where we take too much on ourselves and we act like we're our own gods, or we act like other people are the gods. It's blaming, it's shaming, or it's abdicating responsibility. Next, leaps of logic, where if I think it, it's true. It's not because I'm sleep deprived. It's not because I have been eating too much pizza lately. It's not because of all the other changes that are happening in my life. I'm feeling this right now, and I'm always going to feel like this, and my feelings reflect reality. Next is jumping to conclusions, where we think that we can read other people's minds and we can tell the future. Not true. The last one is magnification, where it's a nuclear bomb every single time. And again, for the adolescent brain, it makes sense why magnification for them. They're so focused on one aspect of their development. One aspect of them that is true and is wonderful. Their sexual development is an absolutely wonderful expression of how God made them, but it's only a part of who they are. So we are relational people, and I'm told that I only have 10 more minutes. But I had some technical difficulties, so I think that should give me a couple more minutes, I'm saying. Okay, so we come out, so I'll quickly go through this. We come out prepared to look around the world around us and be very sensitive to those micro-expressions. Remember I said that if I'm looking at you and if I'm hedging, Mom, is there a God? And I stutter, if I look away, if I pause, they catch it. They catch it. They're so sensitive to it. Emotional coaching, we have the responsibility of helping children develop the language. Don't count on the world to give them the language of what it means to be sad, frightened, scared. We train that. We have the responsibility of what's called emotional coaching. Far too often we're emotional dismissing because we are so busy and we just blow off their very real emotions. In their world, it is a big deal. Object permanence in the life of a 2-year-old. They don't yet know that when the bunny falls out of the crib that it's actually going to be there. In their world, from their viewpoint, Bunny just tragically met the end, and I'm never going to have my bunny ever again, and I'm going to cry about it. We need to swoop in and comfort them, and then show them, hey, here's Bunny. And continue to do that as they grow and change. That their big deal is indeed a big deal, and back to the emotional coaching, give them words to describe their big deal. It's not that there's something wrong with you. It's not that you were born in the wrong body, or that your vagina was actually meant for something else than what God intended it to be. No. What you're actually experiencing, let me frame this for you. You don't need to go on TikTok. You don't need to go to YouTube. You don't need to go to your friends. I'll tell you. I'll have an authentic conversation with you where I'm vulnerable about where I've been, and I'm helping you to understand where you are. Next, personal fable. Oh, an imaginary audience. We have a tendency, so these two are really important. So imaginary audience is where we have a tendency to think that we're the center stage and everyone is looking at us. We carry that through the lifespan, so that's why when we're at the bottom of the rocks and we see our kid is about to go stumble, our imaginary audience says, I don't want to freak out about this too much because I don't see my pastors really freaking out about it. And my spouse doesn't seem to be freaking out about it. Our imaginary audience, we think people are looking at us, and we want to fit in. Let's stop fitting in. The imaginary audience sometimes is real. Sometimes people are watching us. But we have autonomy. We need to own our experience and abide by the law that was written on our hearts. Listen to it. Next, personal fable. This is where we have a tendency in adolescence to believe that we're invincible. The laws of physics do not apply to us. We can speed, we can ingest in things that we know, when we look at the chart that Mom put on the fridge, we know that this is what it would take to get us sick if we have too much of this substance or the other substance. We know that smoking kills how many people and that it's a guarantee you shouldn't smoke, but we think, well, not for me. Not for me. We think that we're invincible, the personal fable. Goodness of fit. Last one. Goodness of fit is where our child, it's a reciprocal relationship. Your child may be very, very different than you. Very, very, very different from you. If you're not a hockey person, go and find someone that they can look up to who is the hockey person. In my child development class, I gave them the task of finding someone who's in an occupation that is not gender norms. So for males, that would be a decorator, a makeup artist, a poet. And here was the kicker. Someone who is a heterosexual who's doing that job. It took them hours to find this person. For females, it's a woodworker, a welder. Fun fact, 96% of welders are men. 99% of brick masons are men. My students went out and actually found a female bricklayer who's a heterosexual who has a nice family. You need to find these people. Put these wonderful role models in front of your children, because without your hours worth of work behind the scenes, trying to figure out where would the community be if your child is interested in this or that. Because being interested in this or that, that's wonderful. That's their talent. Back to goodness or fit. They're different than you. Okay, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. They're wonderfully and fearfully made. Last one. So, impact of dads on your sheet. 1 in 50 chance. 1 in 50. Okay, so now I just get to keep talking. So, all right. So when we look at the back there, 1 in 50 chance. Dads, you have to start doing your jobs. Stand up, making sure that your family is going to church. Making sure that this is in your homes. This is the directive that you have been given. You have been given. And women here, we're not the victims in any of this. What do we do on a daily basis that sets the stage for our husbands to lead? Do we undermine him? Do we mock him? Do we belittle him? Do we do these things in front of our children? How many times with our friends, when we've said, no, I'm not going to do that, and we say, because my doctor said that's not a good idea, or because my therapist said that's not a good idea, or because I read in a book that this isn't a good idea. How many times do we say, though, because my husband said this isn't a good idea, and we own it, and we give him honor? Do we do that? We're called to do that. To the pastors in the room, I would encourage you to take this on directly. Because our goal here isn't to raise happy, healthy children. Our goal is to raise happy, healthy adults who, by the grace of God, we get to see in heaven someday. We share this. The last slide was going to be a rock. Here I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. So we're in Chicago. I don't know much about sports at all, but my understanding is you had a very famous basketball player who, when he was in the hallway, would say, "What time is it?" And what would the people say? Game time. Like Esther, this is our time. This is our time to do it. Whether you're a grandparent, whether you're a parent, whether you're currently struggling with children who are struggling with this or struggling with something else, because again, parenting is messy. Being alive is messy. It's always going to be messy. We'll have trouble, yes, indeed. But what time is it? Okay, I'm going to go to you. What time is it? A little bit louder. What time is it? Game time. Indeed, it is game time. Let's do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's go with questions right away. We have maybe time for 2 questions. I see one coming up. Back to the mic there. Go ahead. Stephen.
I don't know if I zoned out or what, but when you were talking about the parent, the neuter gender parenting books,
yeah,
were those something we're to avoid or something we're to embrace?
Okay, gender neutral means that you're trying to raise a child to basically gaslight themselves and gaslight each other into thinking that reality isn't real. So no, I would encourage you, if you wanted to read them, great, but I would say that is something that set the stage for where we're at today, because we encouraged a generation of parents to be neutral and to let your child figure it out. That, again, trust versus mistrust, we come into the world wanting some structure. We don't want to have to figure out what's the proper time to change our diaper. We expect the adults in the room to figure it out for us. We thrive in an environment where we have nice lanes. And that's the beauty of the law, right? Curb, guide, show us our sin. Okay. It's a wonderful system. And solid parenting supports that. We look at how the Bible designed 2 sexes. We look at every single cell in our body. It testifies to this truth. So we should navigate toward gender solid parenting principles that celebrate the reality that we see.
Yeah, for some reason I was thinking that it meant you can choose what sex you want to be or something. I don't know.
Well, neutral parenting that's the natural expression of neutral parenting, because it's saying let your child figure out, and then everybody's like, oh, well, wait, they figured out that they're actually, if they're a boy, that they're actually a girl. Well, is there any surprise when we've done this whole path along that said, who are you? You figure it out. Nothing is certain. No, there is certainty in this world. Okay. No, there is certainty.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. And Steve, you're right. Those were the things we were to avoid that she was putting up there first.
To be clear.
After that, you said, I have these books that I...
Oh, because, yeah, so the books that I had on my images, I just wanted to point out that those, I want you to see for yourself that this isn't scare tactics from a conservative Christian, that there are books that are actually instructing parents to lean into this ideology and stepping them through how they would do this.
Tom Nicholson from Resurrection in Aurora. We have an elementary school, and one of the things that kind of came to mind as we were going through Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory, dealing with especially elementary age children, and the way they compare each other to each other on the playground. How much adult supervision and intervention should be there during like recess time in order to encourage the kids for the best growth, especially in those critical years? As laid out by Erikson.
Thanks for asking that question. So back in the day, I had what was called an I'm Called program. It was a psychosocial development program for kids for elementary. I think we need to be intentional in the classroom about helping them understand what it means to be a good citizen, what it means to be a good friend, be a good neighbor. And lo and behold, once we give them, again, some structure, They play it out. What we don't want to see is these anti-bully, for example, pledges that essentially take the stance that if I take a pledge, I'm not going to be broken anymore. The reality is things are going to fall apart on the playground, and that's where teachers come in. People are going to be mean, and they're going to be bullies, and those bullies and those mean people are us. And so the more we can help children to see that you're part of the solution and you're part of the problem, and you will always be part of the solution and part of the problem until we go to heaven, yeah, that's why we needed a Savior. Assure them that, and then give them structure and strategies of how do we try to be kind to each other.
Thank you.
And there are wonderful programs that are out there. Mine wasn't the only one. That there are wonderful programs that help children to understand the responsibilities they have of being kind and generous and patient with one another.
And the name of your program once more?
It was I'm Called.
I'm Called. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, I think we'll take a break here now, and please note, according to the schedule, what is it? 2:20. Well, we'll give you 12 minutes, okay? 12 minutes. See you back here. Thank you. Thank you, Dr.